Okay, testing, testing. Okay, and we'll start in just a minute. We're doing some sound checks with our guest speakers, so we'll get to you in just a minute. Okay, and we're doing some sound checks with our guest speakers, so we'll be on in just a second. So we hope to start right at 6 o'clock tonight. So welcome, and grab something to eat or drink, and we'll be ready in a few minutes. Okay, and I think Mr. Bush has joined us, so if you want to just do a sound check, Mr. Bush, that would be fantastic.
Hey, Raquel.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Bush. We're on live and with our performance and assessment in the virtual class students. Before we get started tonight, we're going to do just some housekeeping tonight. I'm going to tell you what's going on for this week as far as your assignments. And then we will be introducing our guest speaker, Mr. Bush. Okay, so this week we have our peer assessment, and if you've never done a peer assessment before in Coursera, it has two phases. The first phase is you're going to complete the actual assignment yourself, which, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we opened up the window a little bit more. We're going to have the assignment open tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and then we're going to make it due after the holiday. So December 2nd will be the due date for this, so everyone will have plenty of time in case they're taking vacations or spending time with family. The second part of the peer assessment is going to be an evaluation of 3 of your classmates' work. So it won't actually appear until you submit your own assignment. So you can't start evaluating the others until the assignment actually submits. At that point, you'll be receiving 3 different assignments chosen at random from your classmates to evaluate. This period will take place between December 3rd and December 9th. So we've got 2 phases that we have to complete in order for you to get full credit for the assignment. During the peer assessment phase, when you're reviewing your classmates' work, you're going to receive a rubric and sample answers. You're going to be evaluating a grade book in this assignment because it's a performance and assessment class. And there's going to be 2 portions. There's going to be a quantitative evaluation in which you're going to have to do some basic calculations as far as gradebook weights and percents. And don't worry, I posted a math review video if it's been a while since you've done those types of calculations. And the second part of that is a qualitative review. And for that, you're going to be giving recommendations, commendations for the gradebook, seeing what the instructor is doing well, and maybe some unintended consequences that may be there in the gradebook management for the fictitious instructor that we have set up for you. You're going to be using the rubric provided and use your professional judgment. And I've already advised not to deduct for rounding errors. There are various ways to do rounding, and you don't want to deduct, take off your classmates for that type of thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a forum for peer assessment questions, and I'm going to monitor that starting tomorrow. So if you open up the peer assessment and have some questions, I will scan that throughout the day so that it'll be available to you. All right, this week we have a very special guest speaker. His name is Jeff Bush. He is the Executive Director of Insight School of Washington. It's one of the largest virtual schools in the United States. And he's been a colleague of mine for 5 years. And during those 5 years, I have seen him create policy, design courses, evaluate, raise the standards for online teaching for both the instructors and enjoy a high rate of success with his students. So he's here today to give us more insight into performance assessment in the virtual classroom, and also to share his views on what makes an excellent virtual teacher. Now, I'm going to open up a question and answer for him. And the way you do that, there's a little tiny button in the bottom left-hand corner of your YouTube live streaming video. It says, "Be a part of the conversation." You're going to have to click that to go to the actual Google Hangout. Once you're there, you're going to see a little tiny kind of a block icon in the top right-hand corner, and you're going to select Q&A. Once you do that, we're going to be able to see your question and answer feed appear to us on the right-hand side of our screen, and we will get to them after Mr. Bush's presentation. Okay, so at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Bush.
Thanks so much, Raquel, and I have to thank you for allowing me to come and speak with your class. I think this is really an important topic and have to share with your students. It's people like Raquel who's really made my job easy over the years, and Raquel's one that's shown great leadership in the online world for us in order to get better as a school, and we miss her every day, and we're excited that she's being able to impact others as they are trying to enter this world and figuring out what online virtual education looks like in regards to performance and assessment. Raquel has kind of asked me tonight to try and touch on some basics. I did give her a PowerPoint. I don't know if she's able to call that up or not at this point in time. But if she's not, then I'll take me just a second because I'm going to load my PowerPoint on as well.
And yes, Mr. Bush, I can show it on the screen, and then you'll disappear for a time. So students, you're just going to see the PowerPoint then, and we won't have the live video stream at this time. Okay.
So I will be brief so that you guys have a chance to answer some questions, but I wanted to collect some thoughts tonight around where we're kind of currently at and where I think we're kind of going in regards to a virtual classroom and assessment in particular. And I think there are a number of things that are driving the interest in online education, and also some things that are, I think, changing a little bit around online education and kind of how it's viewed. I think that it has went through the past as being viewed as a very flexible mode of educational technology and to get from point A to point B. And we're discovering, at least in our high school, that the word flexibility is starting to disappear a little bit, and we're starting to be more and more talking about adaptability and where we're at from an adaptable standpoint. So I don't know how to advance this, Raquel, so if you can help me, that would be great. But I want to speak a little bit about really three things, and I want to talk about curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and how they all fit together. And if you've been in education, you know it's kind of a loop and it's kind of a circle. That curriculum drives instruction, instruction drives assessment, then you look at assessment and you go back to curriculum. So I've kind of broken it out, talking about what we really concentrate on is what do we want kids to know. That really becomes the curriculum piece. And the instruction, what do we do to make sure they know it, which is kind of what you guys, I think, is my understanding, are trying to figure out. And then assessment, how do we know that they know it, and how are we meeting them in that spot? And I think that that's the one thing that we're really looking at for us. We deal with a high risk population of at-risk students who come to us with a lot of different skills, a lot of different talents, in a lot of different places. And I think that's really the key point that we're really starting to get at as we look at the assessment that we're using with our kids. So I think there are a lot of things that are also driving us, at least in our state in Washington, and I think nationally as well. And the impact of the Common Core standards are external impacts that make us look at what we do from a curricular standpoint and instruction standpoint every day. Smarter Balance is going to have a huge impact. Just the rigor of the test, how we're preparing kids to be successful on the Smarter Balance assessment. PARC is the other one that's out there. I don't have a lot of knowledge on PARC, I'll be very honest. It's not something that's driving our thinking here locally, but it is another state assessment that a lot of states are using. It is steered by the Common Core standards and what the state expects us to teach our kids and our kids to learn, and that to be able to show that they can demonstrate. And then just the increasing state expectations on those children left behind. That's a word that's been around for about 10 years now. It's still there. It's not going anywhere, and it's still part of what drives, I think, a lot of state boards of education, national policy, and even state and local policy. And so all of those things really drive us as we look at those three components and how they hook together and how online education can be looked at in regards to assessment and performance. So I know one of the pieces that you guys have been talking about in your classroom over the last few weeks or in this class is just academic integrity in general. And I think there are some tools out there, and I think there are some pieces to the puzzle that are out there. But I really think that at the end of the day, there are, like I said, like I talked about here, programs I'm sure you talked about that check for plagiarism. We use turnedin.com. It's a pretty effective program. There's keyboard stroke recognition programs that are out there. We have not went down that road yet, but it is out there, and I know that some online providers are using that type of piece. Webcams, which I think that we're all familiar with, and at least watch the students as they're being assessed and doing what they need to do. Proctored finals are required in some states and with some programs. The informal assessment during instruction. I think that this is really one of the driving contributors to some of the changes that are starting to take place in the online world. Is what can you do built into your instructional plan where you have that student that's there in that classroom, if you have them lie or even not lie, it's an informal assessment during that instructional component so that you know that you're getting a direct answer back from the student. Discussion posts are another piece that's out there that's part of this to know what you're teaching the kids and whether they're getting it or not. One of the things that we talk about a lot, though, I think the last two are probably the most important, at least in my opinion, as to when you're building assessment in your online classroom to see where kids are at. And for our kids, you really get to know a kid in an online classroom, and I'm sure that that Raquel has talked about this, and I almost called her Mrs. Hernandez because that's what I know her by. She just got married recently. You know, if you can build that relationship with your student, you get to know what that student is capable of and whether that work that comes from them is authentic or not, and whether it is the work that they're doing. And I know that's a big piece of creating that academic integrity piece that's there. And then the other piece I think that's really out there and really growing and getting a good groundswell from is building an authentic opportunity that's a student-created answer to that assessment so they can apply the skills and the knowledge that they have to their own individual outcome that kind of takes them from where they're at to where you want them to go, so you can show that they can show that growth in that particular course. And I want to talk a little bit about the student-driven authentic assessment, and I think that this is one of the things that we continue to talk about in our professional development, to talk about in our professional learning communities that we've created this year. And how do we take our students and know where they're at and build on that level? And with that, with the projects and the things that we're asking students to do, one of the key pieces to that is teacher feedback at every step of the way, and how do you build that into that assessment? And also peer feedback. And I just was listening, and you were talking about the peer reviews you're going to do in this class. It's a big piece of what we're, I think, struggling with a little bit, to get kids all at the same place at the same time and in a timely fashion get that peer review and feedback. And I think that's a trait sometimes that we think that all students know how to do. They don't, I don't think, in many, many cases. And I think that's a skill that as you're designing instruction, you need to teach that. What does peer feedback look like, and how do you generate that, and how do you make kids comfortable with giving each other feedback, and both constructive feedback and stuff that maybe that they don't want to hear, but at the end of the day, it makes them better. And that's building that collaboration into that assessment when it's done. And then I think it's the adaptability in the curriculum instruction and assessment in terms of flexibility. Like I said, we're starting to move away from that term quite a bit. We're really starting to talk more to our families when they come to our programs in the initial stages about how this is school, and we expect you to participate in school every day. And even though you have some flexibility of possibly when you're going to do that, what we're really talking about is we can adapt what we're doing to your schedule a little bit, but you still have to be an active participant in that schedule and in that process, and especially when it comes to, I think, building in authentic assessment for students. I think the more that you can build an application based to it. I was just reading an article today around a staff member who retired from a school and went to work for a local education agency, and then went back into the classroom and really played the part of a student for about a week. And they really were amazed at how they came out and how much of traditional education is kind of sit and get, and how we're really not putting students in a place where they're looking at what they want to do with their lives and being able to take the knowledge that's presented to them and apply it to where they are at and what they want to be as they grow older and are trying to plan for that. So that applications-based piece is, I think, a piece that's beginning to really, I think, come to the forefront as we talk about authentic assessment, especially when we start talking about technological jobs or jobs in the medical field or any place where there's a career orientation that students might be interested in. And then the last two pieces that I think are really important is it needs to be outcome-based. What do you expect at the end of the day, and how do you let kids know what's expected in an assignment in regards to rubrics, in regards to pieces that you want to see as a final product? How do you prepare kids to talk about that and really communicate what they learned from what they did? And I think that's really, as you look at authentic assessment, those are really key components that I think we're just really starting to tap into and talk about. There are a lot of tools out there I know that folks are using around Google Docs in particular, where there's that feedback loop that can take place. There's other products I know that other online LMSs could possess as well. And then the one piece that I think we're concentrating on as staff right now for us, and I see it more nationally as well with what we do, and that's that interim assessment piece. And it's both a formal piece and an informal piece. And that informal piece can come anytime that there is any sort of asynchronous delivery that's coming on. How do you build that in? How do you keep people's attention? How do you get them where they want to be? And then there's more of a formal piece, which I think drives with the authentic assessment, but I also think it is some of that multiple choice, short answer, right or response to a question that you look at that formal assessment piece as you go further. We've built some formal assessments into what we're doing. We're using a product called USA Test Prep this year in math, language arts, and biology, where we have interim assessments every 6 weeks where students will go in, demonstrate the knowledge that they've learned, and then teachers can use that and look at it both on an individual basis and a group basis to be able to go back and reteach whatever kids didn't get and move forward, and also give a lot of celebration and praise for the things that are going really well in the classroom. It also allows them, and I think this is really critical in an online world and something that makes it really unique and special. We have the ability to, as educators, to talk to every student on an individual basis, either through email, through chat, through text messaging, through an Illuminate classroom or a Blackboard Collaborate classroom, whatever that classroom is. You invite a kid at any point in time and have them come in and talk about where they're at and where they want to go. And I think that's a really powerful piece that really makes online for me, the reason why I started to get into this world, to see that it can be different, it can be unique, and it can be much more student-centric in its delivery. And so those are the things that I think are where we're really going. And I think teachers that are able to create ideas around that authentic assessment piece and build these pieces in are the teachers that are going to be the most successful, not only at finding the satisfaction with what they do, but preparing kids to be able to function in the 21st century and beyond as they become adults. The last thing that I think that we've done a lot of over the last couple of years and get better at all the time, and that's just data-driven instruction. We have a plethora of data, and I remember when I first started doing this 5 years ago, that was one of the things I don't think our teachers had a whole lot of visibility into on a daily basis. And, with LMS systems and data collection systems, and even what you collect in your own classroom around the authentic and formal assessments, you have a tremendous amount of data. It's a matter of sorting through that data and really deciding what's important, what do you want to concentrate on, because for us, it really allows our teachers to steer their behaviors and their thinking and their concentration points for that next week, whether it be with a small group of students, a large group of students, in our case, our advisory students in our homeroom setting. But teachers can really pinpoint and look at and dig down into who's getting what, who's active and engaged in the course, and data-driven instruction really allows teachers to also look at what they did well and what they need to go back and cover again. And I don't think that happens as much as we'd like to see it in the traditional type of classroom. I think data also can build in those checkpoints for students along the way, and students should be using their own data to see where they're at. It's where did they start, where do you want them to go, and how do you make sure that they're getting there? And it really gets back to what do we want them to learn, how do we know that they're learning it, what are we doing if they don't learn it? And data really is a driving force behind that. And then finally, I think that data-driven instructional piece really builds that roadmap for us so that our teachers have a concentration point on a weekly basis where they can really go in and say, okay, I need to focus on this particular concept this week, because when I did my informal assessment, formal assessment last week, I see that my kids didn't really get this. And I want to make sure that they get this, because at the end of the day, I know this is on the state assessment. I know that kids are going to have to pass that state assessment. For us, it's a graduation requirement here in the state of Washington. And it really does steer that thinking and that behavior of the student. So those are just some initial thoughts that I think drive our practice in what we do, trying to educate our students at the high school level at Inside School of Washington. And I don't know what questions you have, and I don't know, Raquel, if you have some questions that have come up, but I'm happy to try to answer them. I will say that I think we are, even though online education has been around for a while now, I think we are getting again to a kind of a tipping point with it where it's going to continue to change and evolve and get stronger at what it does. I think that also more of the concepts of what can be done in a virtual classroom is being brought into a traditional type of classroom. I've read Christensen's book, Disrupting Class, a number of times, and if you look at what he says in his book about disrupting class, he's not very far off. He basically says in his book that the concepts and the pieces around assessment and instruction and curriculum are going to venture their way and filter their way into a traditional setting. And I really think that's what we're starting to see now, and I think the school districts are starting to see that online can be a tremendous asset to what they're doing, and teachers are really seeing that as a somewhat as an organizational tool, but also something they can adapt very quickly to each of their individual students. So I'm excited about where things are going.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. We have a question from Roland, and the question is, are we testing the same skills in the virtual classroom as in the traditional brick-and-mortar classroom?
I'd say the answer to that, Roland, is absolutely. We have to test the math skills that kids need to possess to be able to be successful, not only on their school exams, but also on the state assessment exams that they need to. We will be using the performance prompts to prepare our kids for SBAC, and so we'll be looking at those skills and collecting the data and giving feedback to those students in math in particular. Language arts, very, very similar type of expression where we're doing a lot of revision of writing. We do talk about the 6+1 traits of writing. I wish we were stronger at that. I think that's a challenge for us to do across all of our virtual classrooms, but it is knowledge that our teachers do have and try to get at. And then it really gets at that rubric piece. Biology as well, preparing kids for, and of course biology assessment for us is something that drives what we do. So I don't see the online world as any different. If anything, I think we can test more skills of students in regards to being able to utilize technology and really do, for lack of a better term, some of those hidden curriculum things that we thought we've done well in a traditional classroom for a long time. But I think online really lends itself to that daily piece of kids have to demonstrate the ability to navigate through technology, to use technology, and then take that technology to make what they do better.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Bush. We have a question from Carmen, and Carmen would like clarification on the age of students and the virtual education available. Can students receive a regular school year in a virtual modality is her question.
Yes, we actually work a very traditional type of calendar as far as days go. With our school, we're grades 9 through 12. I do have some familiarity with K through 8, but it's not something I work in on a daily basis. I do have a couple of daughters that are actually taking classes online in a full-time, that is their full-time educational setting. So I get a little view of that world as well as I'm working into my world. So it is something that is out there, and we work a pretty traditional classroom schedule. We have units, usually about 4 to 6 units per semester, depending on the content area. We do a Algebra 1A in the fall and an Algebra 1B in the spring. And by the time the year is out, the students are prepared to take the end of course assessment in the spring because they've had 2 semesters of Algebra 1 as an example.
Thank you. And we have a question from Nargis. And Nargis, I've seen you post many times in the forums, and I just want to say I appreciate your insight and your comments. And her question is, do the teachers get training in question writing and developing rubrics?
So a lot of, for us, because we do work for a national organization, a lot of the questioning things that are out there for students are made. Now we do encourage our teachers to go in and modify what they want to modify in regards to making it better. We do encourage them to create rubrics that they want to use with assessments that they may create that are outside of what is provided in the curriculum that they have to teach. And I know many of our teachers have become very good at saying, look, I think this can be done differently and better if I look at it this way. I still know that I have to match the state standards that are within that course and that curriculum. And so they really use what's in the learning management system from a curricular standpoint to steer the instructional pieces, and then often go in and modify potentially the assessments that are there to meet the students' needs, and sometimes to meet their own needs to make sure that the students get what they think they want them to get.
Fantastic. Many of our students that are taking this course are coordinators for online learning in their respective districts, and they've been very interested in policy making around academic integrity. Do you have any advice or any place for them to really start?
I think that is one of those things that will continue to be a struggle in the grand scheme of things. How do you know the authenticity of a student's work? And I think that, like I said, the couple pieces that we depend upon a lot is around our teachers knowing their kids. But we do have policy around plagiarism. We do have kids that get called on the carpet and get sent to the principal's office, so to speak. And so we often will have a conversation with them. Oftentimes teachers in our world will say, okay, we'll give you an opportunity to do it in a different fashion. And so I think that it's easy for us to take a student that's maybe, say, plagiarized a paper that they've done and say, look, we understand that you pulled all this off the internet, you put it all together. We look at it as a teaching experience, as what we do, and so teachers can then go in with the help of our administrative team to work with that student and that family in particular and say, look, let's try this at a different angle to try to get them where they need to be. I don't know in regards to strict policy around consequences. I know, at least for our kids, like I said, we're a pretty high-risk population. Most of our kids have been consequence to death. And so we want to look for ways that they can grow as young people, learn from that mistake that they may have made to get better at what they're doing. We also do all of our state tests are proctored, and I know that's one of the things that I think was a topic of interest for you guys. We will spend a pretty good chunk of cash to get our testing equipment to sites, to proctor those sites. We will spend about 4 to 6 weeks this year at about 30 different sites around the state of Washington where kids will come in at different times to take the SBAC exam, both the performance task and the computer-generated tasks. We'll do those on the same day. Now, it's not recommended in most districts, but because of the fact that our students have to travel in this world and this proctored exam, we do expect them to be there. We do have policies that we've generated around attendance for that. And so those are the policies that we struggle with, is how do we get our kids to participate in the state exam, and then how do we prepare them for that. So I don't know if that's a great answer. I think that policy decisions around that piece is a little weak. If you were to start somewhere, I would start to look at what tools can you put in place first that you're going to use to kind of steer that thought around whether you know it's authentic work of students and whether it's not authentic work of students. Once you just, I think, decipher what you want to use to make those determinations, now you can start to talk about policy and disciplinary things that you want to put in place. But I think first you have to establish what are you going to use to even know that you have an issue, and I think that's the key component.
And I think the LMS is a big component of that as well. And most of our the students that we have in this class work within the district. So the district has some type of academic integrity policy, and where they're struggling is how to modify it to the LMS and how to modify it for their virtual learners, so they're able to keep up with the emerging technology. And the LMS systems are getting better and better at providing teachers what they need. And the LMS developers are listening to the teachers. The teachers are saying, hey, I need this for my special ed students. I need this to help with academic integrity. And the LMS systems that are coming out are getting better and better. It's just taking time to catch up with all the technology. So usually the district has something in place, and they can work with their districts and their school boards to develop the policy that's clearly geared toward the virtual learners or the students that are in a hybrid learning situation.
And I'll just add to that, Raquel, you and I talked about this a little bit. There are so many tools that are developing. Staying on top of those tools and looking at those tools is really a piece that I think there's a gap in the market right now, and I think they are developing so quickly. But in regards to just policy around it, I think the more that you can build that's authentic into what that student can do that is individualized to them, a lot of that academic integrity piece starts to take care of itself, because there's no way that a student can do their own work and it can't be their work. And the kids they can't cheat, so to speak, if it's their own work at the end of the day. And I think some of that is really beginning to build into that push to build things where students are creating their own outcomes based off of what you want them to demonstrate.
Exactly. We're finding two types of groups that are taking the class with us. One group might teach in a virtual school where the curriculum is pre-made for them, and they're basically handed the course and they need to do very little modifications. And we have another group that is doing startup programs in their respective districts, and they're finding themselves creating entire courses, including assessments, including building out grade books, and virtually the entire textbook type of thing online. So what advice would you have for those teachers who are in the situation of creating their own assessments and grade books in order to really make a statistically sound grade book?
Keep it simple, stupid, sort of, I think is a good thing as you're building it out, at least at first. Figure out what your main points are that you want kids to get, that you want to get across to kids, and build that. And then as you continue to look at and go back and revise all the time as you're building your own curriculum, I think that's a key component, is build it, take a look at it, use what you've learned from it, go back, modify it to make it better. You're not going to build probably something that's perfect the first time around. Don't beat yourself up for it. Learn what you can learn from what you did build, and then improve upon it, build upon it. Look for learning objects that I think you can embed into your own curriculum. I think that's one of the big pieces that's really out there now. And there are companies that actually, that's what their main business is to be able to pull learning objects from a lot of different sources into a singular type of repository. And then teachers are able to go in and pull out the learning objects that fit each of the individual students or their individual classes. And so look for those opportunities and see if you can find folks that have kind of already done that work prior to you having to create the whole thing from scratch, so to speak. And then I think it's important to know as well, if you're using something that you got from another source, it's almost like a canned type of curriculum, I think that the ability to go in and constantly look at what you have available to you and compare that to the standards and benchmarks that you want to get across to your kids and what is expected from you in regards to whatever state that you're in. I think it's a critical component, just because you think that it's out there doesn't necessarily mean that it is there. And so there may be components that you may see even in something that's been pre-made for you, and you may think, this isn't strong enough because it doesn't match what I need to make sure our kids know at the end of the day. So I think there's two very, very different approaches that you have to take there, and both of them are making it work for you and making it work for your students. Learning from each and every time that you go through those particular components, and then making those modifications. And that's really, as a former classroom teacher, I do that all the time. Even in a traditional setting, you teach something that went well, you probably did it again the next year and you improved upon it. If it didn't go so well, you probably threw it out and started to do something different at that point in time. But I think anytime you can find outside resources to bring in, A, get kids' attention, B, make them feel like they're doing something that's new and unique and they're interested in, then you're going to get their interest and you're going to have a better outcome.
Fantastic. And I think the last question is if you could describe the importance of teacher-student interaction in the virtual environment and how that relates to authentic assessment. So how does a teacher-student relationship relate to this performance and assessment piece that we're looking at?
I think it's a huge component of the academic integrity piece. And when we interview teachers, I always ask them if you've taken an online class before. Have you taught an online class before? And I'm really interested in the classes that they've taken as an online learner. And really, just about verbatim, I'll ask teachers, was it a good class? Was it not a good class? What made it a good class? What didn't make it a good class if they took an online class? And almost every time I will get the same answer. Those classes that they took that were asynchronous in nature, which means basically there was discussion forums, but not a whole lot of teacher interaction, were not classes that were particularly enjoyable to them. They really thrived and really got more interested in an online world with those classes that they took where there was an actual synchronous type of component where they had some direct and live interaction with their instructor and got feedback from their instructor on that piece. So I can't say enough how important I think that synchronous component is to a quality online type of offering for a student. And I think that the students, at least in this case in the high school, they thrive on that. Many of them do need that. You'll have some that will perform really, really well not having that component. We call them the hunky-dories in some cases, but they're also the kids that often come to our live sessions. I think the more opportunities you can have to get to know your students, the more you're going to know at the end of the day, hey, is this work that Jeff could have produced, knowing that I know Jeff and the work that I've done with him in a particular classroom. So I think that that relational piece is really a large component to a really quality online type of class.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If there's no more questions, we'll wait a few more minutes for questions, and if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Just a reminder that the peer assessment will open tomorrow at 8 a.m., and that's Pacific Standard Time. So our students that are with us internationally, we're going to be on California time for that, and that will be open through December 2nd at 11:55 p.m. So you have plenty of time to get your peer assessment in. I'll also set up a forum in the morning where you can ask questions and if there's any issues that come up with the assessment. Okay, so we'll wait just a couple more minutes, and if there's no more questions, then we'll go ahead and dismiss. And if you're just joining us, make sure you click Be Part of the Conversation if you want to ask a question. If you view it straight from the YouTube page, you're just going to be watching the streaming video, but you won't be able to interact. So you do have to click on that little button that says Be Part of the Conversation. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming through, so I want to thank Mr. Bush for his time. He's been a mover and shaker in the online world and running a very successful school in the state of Washington. So thank you, Mr. Bush, for spending time with us tonight.
Thanks, Raquel. Have a great rest of the night. I appreciate you asking me to do this.
All right, take care.